In the quiet of a small-town diner, nestled along a desolate stretch of highway, the air buzzed with the low hum of casual conversations and the soft clink of utensils. Rain drizzled against the fogged-up windows, creating a cozy, cocooned atmosphere inside. Most patrons were regulars, truck drivers, a family passing through, and a few retirees savoring their coffee refills. In a corner booth, a man in a leather jacket and worn jeans sat alone, his head bowed over a paperback novel. His black cap obscured most of his face, but the unmistakable kindness in his demeanor occasionally drew curious glances. He was Keanu Reeves, though nobody seemed to notice, just the way he preferred it. The jingle of the doorbell broke the rhythm of the diner as an older man entered, maneuvering a wheelchair with one hand while holding onto the leash of a shaggy German shepherd with the other. His weathered army jacket, adorned with faded patches, was a testament to a life of service. His name was Albert Price, a retired veteran who wore his burdens openly, graying hair, a missing leg, and tired eyes that still carried a glint of quiet resolve. Albert rolled up to the counter and smiled politely. "Just a coffee and a slice of pie, please." Before the waitress could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. "You can't have that dog in here." All eyes turned toward a young man behind the counter, his name tag reading Nick. He had a scowl on his face and a tone that suggested he wasn't interested in debating the matter. Albert's smile faltered. "He's my service dog," he said gently, patting the German shepherd's head. "I can show you the paperwork." Nick crossed his arms. "Don't care. Health code rules say no animals." "You want pie, you'll have to leave the dog outside." A murmur rippled through the diner, and some patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Albert, however, remained calm, though a flicker of hurt crossed his face. "I've never had an issue before," he said. "It's just me and Max here trying to get by." "Well, now you've got an issue," Nick snapped. From the corner booth, Keanu set his book down, his expression tightening. Slowly, he stood and walked toward the counter, his boots echoing softly against the tiled floor. "Excuse me," Keanu said, his voice calm but firm. "This man's got every right to be here with his dog." Nick looked up, his scowl deepening. "Who are you, his lawyer?" Keanu tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. "No, just someone who believes in treating people with respect." The tension in the room thickened, and a woman seated nearby spoke up hesitantly. "He's right, Nick. Service dogs are allowed." Nick waved her off. "Mind your business." Albert cleared his throat. "It's all right," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I don't want to cause trouble." But Keanu stepped closer to the counter, his expression hardening. "You're not causing trouble. He's causing trouble by picking on you." Nick opened his mouth to retort, but before he could speak, a crash came from the back of the diner. A stack of plates tumbled to the floor, and the sound of shattered ceramic jolted everyone. At the same time, the door flew open again, and a figure burst inside, a young man, drenched from the rain, his face hidden behind a hood. In his hand was a small handgun, shaking as much as the trembling hand holding it. "Everybody down," the man shouted, his voice cracking with fear. The diner erupted into chaos. Patrons ducked under tables, chairs screeched against the floor, and the waitress dropped her tray with a loud clatter. Keanu instinctively moved in front of Albert, shielding him and his dog. The man's eyes darted around the room, his breath ragged. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he yelled. I need money, okay? Just give me the cash." Nick froze behind the counter, his earlier bravado gone. "Look, man, we don't keep much in the register. Please, just take it and go." The young man's grip on the gun tightened, and his voice wavered. Just hurry." Keanu, still standing protectively in front of Albert, raised his hands slowly. "Hey," he said softly. "Take a deep breath. No one here wants to stop you. Let's talk, all right?" The man swung the gun toward Keanu, his eyes wide and wild. "Shut up. Just stay back." "I'm staying right here," Keanu replied, his voice calm but steady. "I just want to know your name." The man hesitated, as if caught off guard by the question. Why do you care?" "Because you're more than just this moment," Keanu said, his tone gentle. "You've got a story. And maybe we can figure out another way for it to go." Albert, still seated behind Keanu, spoke up quietly. "Son," he said, his voice calm and steady, "I've been where you are. Lost, scared, not knowing where to turn. But there's always a way forward." The man's hands shook harder, his desperation etched into every line of his face. "You don't get it. My mom, she's sick. I don't have the money for her medicine. They're going to throw us out of our apartment." Keanu nodded slowly. "That's a heavy burden. But this isn't the way. Put the gun down, and we'll figure it out together." The man's breath hitched, his resolve beginning to crumble. The diner was silent, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. The diner held its collective breath as the young man's trembling hands wavered, the barrel of the gun dipping slightly. Keanu Reeves stayed calm, his dark eyes fixed on the man with a quiet intensity. "What's your name?" Keanu asked again, his voice steady and warm, like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. The young man hesitated. Evan," he stammered, his gaze darting nervously between Keanu and the cash register. "Okay, Evan," Keanu said. "You're scared. I get that. But everyone here just wants you to be okay. Let's figure this out." From the corner of the room, Albert Price shifted slightly in his wheelchair. His service dog, Max, whined softly, sensing the tension. Albert raised a hand, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "Son, listen to me. I've seen combat. I've faced things I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But you're not my enemy. You're someone who needs help." Evan turned toward Albert, his grip on the gun faltering further. You don't know what it's like," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm trying to save my mom. She's all I have." Albert's voice softened. "I do know. I lost my family when I came back from the war. I didn't have anyone to turn to. But there's always a better way, son. You don't have to do this." Keanu nodded, taking a cautious step closer. "Evan, you've got people here who want to help you, not hurt you. Let's put the gun down, and we'll figure out how to make things right." Evan's chest heaved with shallow breaths. The weight of his desperation hung heavy in the air. Slowly, his fingers uncurled from the gun's grip, and the weapon clattered to the floor. A collective exhale rippled through the diner. Keanu stepped forward, gently placing a hand on Evan's shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "That takes courage." The sound of sirens grew louder outside, their wailing cutting through the rain. A moment later, the door swung open, and two officers entered with their weapons drawn. Officer Maya Collins, the lead officer, quickly assessed the scene. Her sharp eyes landed on Keanu, who raised a hand in a calming gesture. "It's under control," Keanu said. "No one's hurt. He just needs help." The officers approached cautiously, securing the weapon and guiding Evan outside. As they passed, Evan turned to Keanu, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered. Keanu nodded, his expression one of quiet understanding. The unexpected reunion. As the tension eased, the diner slowly came back to life. Patrons emerged from beneath tables, murmuring to each other about what had just unfolded. Albert wheeled himself over to Keanu, Max padding alongside him. "Thank you," Albert said, his voice thick with emotion. "For standing up for me and for that boy." Keanu shook his head. "You did just as much, if not more." Your words reached him. Before Albert could respond, the diner door opened again, this time revealing a woman in her early 30s. Her rain-soaked hair clung to her face, and her eyes scanned the room anxiously. When they landed on Albert, they widened in disbelief. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. Albert froze, his hand gripping the armrest of his wheelchair. "Sarah," he choked out. The woman rushed forward, falling to her knees in front of him. "I thought I'd lost you," she sobbed. "I've been looking for you for years." Albert's hands shook as he reached out, cupping her face. I thought you didn't want to find me," he said, his voice breaking. Sarah shook her head vehemently. "No, Dad. I was angry. I didn't understand why you left, but when I found out what happened, I was too ashamed to face you." Tears streamed down Albert's face as he pulled her into an embrace. The diner watched in silence, moved by the raw emotion of the reunion. Even Keanu, usually stoic, blinked back tears as he witnessed the scene. "I never stopped loving you, kiddo," Albert said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Never. And I never stopped needing you," Sarah replied, clutching him tightly. A new beginning. Later that night, as the rain let up, the diner began to clear out. The patrons who had witnessed the extraordinary events carried with them a renewed sense of humanity. Keanu approached the counter, where the waitress handed him his tab with a shaky smile. "That was something," she said. Keanu smiled faintly. "Yeah, it was." He turned to Albert and Sarah, who were seated together at a booth, deep in conversation. "Take care of each other," he said softly. Albert nodded, his gratitude shining through his weary features. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. For everything." Keanu gave a small wave and stepped out into the cool night air. As he walked toward his car, he couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. It wasn't the kind of story that would make headlines, but it was one he'd carry with him, a reminder of the quiet power of compassion. For Albert, Sarah, and even Evan, it was a night that marked the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild, to forgive, and to move forward.